The Silver Shore Resort stretched across 12 acres of pristine beachfront along the North Carolina coast. White sand beaches, infinity pools that blended into the ocean, a five-star restaurant, and rooms starting at $800 per night. It was exactly the kind of place my family loved, luxury they could brag about. I had owned it for 3 years. They had no idea. The family reunion invitation arrived 6 weeks earlier, written in my mother Evelyn Parker's elegant handwriting. She announced that this year's gathering would be held at an exclusive coastal resort. The message beneath the words was clear: come prepared to be impressed, and reminded of where you stand. I arrived on Friday afternoon dressed the way I always did, simple jeans, a soft t-shirt, and my old grey Honda Civic. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I parked behind a lineup of luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, and Teslas gleaming under the sun. The valet glanced at my car, his expression carefully polite, but unmistakably dismissive. "Enjoy your stay," he said, handing me the ticket like a formality meant for guests who barely belonged. I smiled and walked inside. The lobby was breathtaking. High ceilings, polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the ocean. Sunlight spilled across the room exactly as I had envisioned during the redesign 2 years earlier. I'd personally approved every detail. My family would never suspect that. To them, I was still Lena Parker, the quiet one, the disappointment, the daughter with the boring tech job. "Lena. Over here." My mother waved from a cluster of chairs near the windows, surrounded by my aunts, uncles, and cousins. Drinks in hand, laughter already flowing, hierarchy firmly established. "There you are," Evelyn said, her eyes quickly scanning my clothes with visible disapproval. "We've been here since noon." Check-in was flawless. This place really knows how to treat proper guests. "It's beautiful," I replied honestly. Aunt Marilyn, my mother's younger sister, smiled tightly. "It really is. Frank and I stayed in Monaco last year, but this might actually rival it. The room rates alone tell you the class of people who stay here," my mother added pointedly. $800 a night for standard rooms. We booked an ocean view suite, $2,000 per night. "Worth every cent," Uncle Frank said, lifting his glass. I took a seat at the edge of the group, already slipping into my familiar role, the quiet observer. No one noticed the irony. "How was the drive, Lena?" Aunt Rachel asked. She was the only one who ever tried. "About 5 hours," I said. "Traffic wasn't bad." Still living in that small apartment, my mother asked casually, though she already knew the answer. "Yes." She sighed dramatically. "I don't know how you manage. Our house has 6 bedrooms and still feels cramped when we entertain." "Different priorities," I said evenly. My cousin Vanessa looked up from her phone. "Are you still doing that data thing?" "Data analytics." She wrinkled her nose. "Sounds dull." Her attention returned to her screen. "It pays the bills," I said. "Barely," Aunt Marilyn added with fake sympathy. "Tech jobs are so unstable. Layoffs everywhere." "My company is doing well." "My dear," my mother laughed, "you work for a company. You don't own one." I let it go. I always did. The afternoon unfolded predictably. My aunts compared designer handbags. My uncles debated investments and golf courses. My cousins bragged about promotions, condos, and international trips. I listened. At 6, my mother clapped her hands. "Dinner is at 7 in the main restaurant. Please dress appropriately. This is not a casual place." Her eyes flicked to me. I brought something suitable, I replied. Back in my room, an ocean view suite booked under my own name, I changed into a simple black dress. Minimal design. Exceptional tailoring. The kind of dress that whispered money rather than shouted it. The restaurant glowed with candlelight and elegance. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, ocean waves visible beyond the windows. I'd personally recruited the executive chef from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Charleston. My family was already seated. Lena, my mother called, we are discussing the wine list. The sommelier recommended a Bordeaux, Uncle Frank said. $200 a bottle. We should order several, Aunt Marilyn suggested. Only those who truly appreciate fine wine should split the cost, my mother said quickly, glancing at me. I'll have water, I said calmly. See, my mother smiled. She's content with simple choices. The implication settled heavily on the table. Dinner arrived in flawless courses. Scallops. Lobster bisque. Ribeye cooked to perfection. My family praised every plate with theatrical sophistication. This is real fine dining, Vanessa said, posting photos online. Not like chain restaurants normal people eat at. Normal people like Lena, Marilyn laughed. I cut into my steak and said nothing. As dinner continued, the atmosphere around the table shifted. The earlier bragging softened into something sharper, more pointed. Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass like a man delivering wisdom. You know, he said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, true luxury isn't something you can explain. You have to reach a certain level in life before you can really appreciate it. Aunt Marilyn nodded eagerly. Exactly. Anyone can walk into a fancy place and pretend. But actually belonging. That's different. That takes success. My mother smiled approvingly, clearly enjoying the conversation. It's about earning your place. I stayed quiet, cutting into my steak. Vanessa looked up from her phone. Dad, weren't you talking about buying a vacation home around here? Somewhere the whole family could use. I was, Frank admitted. But prices on this coast are insane. Anything decent is multi-million dollars. Well, Ethan added, what about this resort? Does anyone know who owns it? Frank waved his hand dismissively. Some massive investment group, I'm sure. These places aren't owned by individuals. This is corporate money. My mother sighed. It would be wonderful to have a place like this for family gatherings. Somewhere elegant. But that's beyond most people, Marilyn said, her eyes drifting toward me. Some people, she corrected herself pointedly. Then Frank turned directly to me. So, Lena, still living in that little apartment. 1 bedroom, I corrected calmly. And still driving that old Honda. He chuckled. Reliable is fine, but at some point, you have to upgrade if you want to move forward in life. A bit harsh, Aunt Rachel said gently. I'm just being honest, Frank replied. Lena is almost 30. At that age, most people in this family had real careers, real assets. Homes. Investments. It's a different path, Rachel tried again. A lower path, Marilyn said bluntly. And that's okay. Not everyone can be exceptional. Someone has to be average. My mother nodded slowly. We've accepted that Lena has limitations. She's content with less. The table fell quiet. You don't belong at this level, my mother said finally, her voice calm but firm. And I don't mean that cruelly. I mean it realistically. This lifestyle, this resort, it's for people who've earned it. She should stick to motels, Marilyn added with a small laugh. Nothing wrong with that. I set my fork down carefully. You might be right, I said, pushing my chair back and standing. And that was the exact moment everything changed. I had just pushed my chair back when a calm, confident voice cut through the tension. Miss Carter. I turned and saw a man standing beside our table, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. His posture was professional, his expression respectful. I recognized him instantly, Daniel Moore, the managing director of Silver Shore Resort. He had spent more than 2 decades running luxury properties across 3 continents, and was one of the first people I hired after acquiring the resort. Yes? I said. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, Daniel said smoothly, his voice steady enough to carry without drawing attention, though he had everyone's attention anyway. But there are a few matters that require your approval. The table went completely silent. Daniel continued without hesitation. The contractors have completed the spa renovations ahead of schedule. They are requesting your final sign-off before proceeding with the landscaping phase. My mother blinked. Aunt Marilyn froze mid-sip. Also, Daniel added, the architects delivered the finalized plans for the new beachfront villas this afternoon. I've placed the documents in your office for review whenever you're ready. I nodded calmly. Good. I'll look at them tonight. He smiled slightly. Excellent. One more thing, the quarterly financial reports were finalized this morning. Revenue is up 18% compared to last quarter. The restaurant has been operating at full capacity most evenings, and we are fully booked for the next 6 months. That's great news, I said. Please pass my thanks to the department heads. Of course. Daniel paused, then added, your private residence is also prepared, should you prefer to move there for the remainder of your stay. The ocean view suite is fine, I replied. Very well. Will you be joining the management team for the expansion meeting tomorrow morning? They'd appreciate your input. I'll be there. Daniel inclined his head respectfully, then glanced at the frozen faces around the table. Forgive me, but are these guests causing you any discomfort? I can have arrangements made if necessary. They are family, I said simply. Understood, he replied, instantly neutral again. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Miss Carter. He turned and walked away. For several seconds, no one spoke. My mother's face had gone pale. Aunt Marilyn's mouth was slightly open. Uncle Frank stared at me as if I was someone else entirely. Finally, my mother whispered, Lena, what was that? I slowly sat back down. That, I said calmly, was Daniel Moore, the managing director of this resort. Frank swallowed hard. And why exactly does he need your approval? I met their stunned expressions evenly. Because, I said, he works for me. The words hung in the air like a sudden storm. He works for you. Uncle Frank repeated, his confident tone completely gone. Yes, I said evenly. Because I own Silver Shore Resort. For a moment, no one spoke. It was as if the table itself was struggling to process the truth. Aunt Marilyn's lips parted, but no sound came out. My mother stared at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. You're joking, Vanessa whispered. I'm not. The entire place? Frank asked hoarsely. All 12 acres, I confirmed. The resort, the restaurant, the spa, the beachfront, everything. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. Lena, how? I bought it 3 years ago, I continued calmly. I purchased it for $47 million. After the renovations and expansion, it's now valued at well over $65 million. Silence again. My company paid for it, I went on. Northwave Analytics. Aunt Rachel leaned forward. Your company? Yes. I founded Northwave Analytics 6 years ago. We provide financial modeling and data analysis for investment firms. We started with 2 people. We now have 46 employees and offices in New York, Charlotte, and Atlanta. Frank shook his head slowly. But you said you just worked in data. I do, I said. I just happen to own the company. My mother's voice trembled. Why didn't you ever tell us? I did, I replied quietly. More than once. You just didn't hear me. That apartment, Marilyn said weakly. That car. I like my apartment, I said. It's close to my office. And my car works perfectly fine. I never felt the need to prove my success with appearances. Frank leaned back, stunned. Then why let us think you were struggling? Because I wanted to see, I said honestly. I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you believed I had nothing. My mother swallowed hard. You mocked me, I continued. You pitied me. You told me I didn't belong. You offered to help me pay for things I've been covering for years. What do you mean? Aunt Marilyn asked. Every time you've stayed here, I said calmly, every meal, every spa visit, every service, it's all been on me. I've camped family visits since the day I bought this place. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We thought we were being supportive, she whispered. Support doesn't sound like telling someone they don't belong, I replied softly. No one argued. For the first time in years, they finally saw me, not as the failure they'd imagined, but as the person I'd quietly become. The silence at the table felt heavier than any argument. No one reached for their food. No one spoke. The truth had settled in, and there was nothing left to say. I slowly placed my napkin on the table and stood up. Please, my mother said, her voice shaking. She reached for my hand, her confidence finally gone. Don't leave like this. Let's talk. We've been talking for years, I replied quietly. You just weren't listening. Uncle Frank opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had nothing to say. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay, I continued calmly. Your rooms and meals are covered, just like they always have been. That hurt more than any accusation. I turned and walked away from the table. I could feel eyes following me as I crossed the restaurant. Some curious. Some shocked. Some sympathetic. I didn't look back. Near the entrance, Daniel Moore was waiting, his professional composure firmly in place. Is everything all right, Miss Carter? He asked quietly. Fine, I said. Just family. I apologize if my interruption caused discomfort, he said. You did exactly what you were supposed to, I assured him. They were about to help me pay for dinner. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. I understand. Would you like me to arrange separate dining accommodations for the remainder of your stay? That won't be necessary. I'll take my meals in my suite. Of course. I'll inform Chef Julian. I thanked him and headed toward the elevators. My phone vibrated constantly in my bag, messages from my mother, Aunt Marilyn, Vanessa, and Frank. Apologies. Explanations. Sudden affection. I turned the phone off. My private residence occupied the entire top floor of the main building. When I stepped inside, the ocean greeted me in silence and motion. Waves rolled endlessly beneath the balcony, glowing gold beneath the setting sun. I stepped outside and breathed deeply. I hadn't built everything I had just to feel small at a dinner table. There was a soft knock at the door. Room service. Chef Julian had sent my favorite meal, simple pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil, roasted vegetables, and a slice of dark chocolate torte. No performance. No pretension. Just comfort. I ate alone on the balcony, listening to the ocean, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Tomorrow, there would be meetings. Expansion plans. Decisions to make. Tonight, I allowed myself to simply exist, free from judgment, free from expectation, and finally free from needing their approval. Morning arrived quietly at Silver Shore Resort. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my private residence, spilling across the polished wood floors. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the balcony, calm and steady, unbothered by family drama or bruised egos. I stood with a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the waves roll in. Whatever had happened the night before was done. There was no rewinding it, no softening the truth. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to. My phone buzzed on the table behind me. I hadn't turned it back on, but curiosity got the better of me. Messages flooded the screen, long apologies from my mother, defensive explanations from Aunt Marilyn, awkward congratulations from cousins who had mocked me just hours earlier. I didn't respond. Instead, I dressed and headed to the management wing. Daniel Moore was already there, reviewing documents with the department heads. The mood shifted the moment I entered, not with fear, but with respect. These were people who knew my work, who had watched me walk construction sites, debate budgets, and fight for quality. "Good morning," Daniel said. "We are ready whenever you are." For the next 2 hours, we discussed expansion plans. 6 new beachfront villas. A redesigned spa wing. Sustainable upgrades that would preserve the coastline while increasing long-term value. Numbers, timelines, impact. This was the world I belonged to, the one where my voice mattered. After the meeting, I flew out that afternoon for a client presentation in Charlotte. Another deal. Another opportunity. Another step forward. That evening, Daniel called. "Your mother is in the lobby," he said gently. "She's asking to speak with you." "Tell her I'm not available tonight," I replied. "She can leave a message." "Of course." "One more thing. Several staff members mentioned your family has been asking questions." "What did you tell them?" "The truth," Daniel said simply. "That you've owned Silver Shore for 3 years. That you personally oversaw its transformation. And that you are one of the most hands-on owners I've worked with in 30 years. Thank you." After the call, I stepped back onto the balcony. The ocean was darker now, stretching endlessly into the horizon. Somewhere beyond it were new properties, new ideas, and new challenges waiting to be built. One final message appeared, from Aunt Rachel. "I'm proud of you. Always have been." "That one," I answered. "The rest, I left behind." Because success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about building a life so full and real that their opinions no longer matter. And I was just getting started.